I trust most people. I trust most people would already have their booster shots. Yeah, I think, yeah, because it seems even the young ones, even my sons, have had scheduled their booster shots scheduled. So that's a really good sign. I hope you all have gone to have your booster shots as encouraged by Dr. Hamza, as encouraged by Mr. Lee last 2 weeks, to remember to get your booster shot and not read too many, not read too much into a lot of the much forwarded WhatsApp messages and conspiracy theories. So, please do that and let's all keep safe. So we have a really important subject matter today on diabetes. But as usual, we have a very, our guest speaker today, Faisal Manso, many of you already know, is one of our, somebody said, when I sent out this, somebody said, oh, that's my favorite speaker. See, Faisal, you've got a tall order, you've got high expectations to me, but I'm very sure all of us here will benefit from Faisal, because Faisal always takes the subject of health from a very interesting angle. And today his topic is diabetes. Is it just about sugar? Or, what else? He's going to give us some advice. So many of you know Faisal. Faisal actually works as a senior manager in a GLC. But for those of you that don't already know, he and his wife both have a diploma in diet and nutrition, as well as an advanced certificate in nutritional therapy. So they're very well versed in the subject matter. They're also both advocates in the plant-based diets and, have challenged us on many occasions to move our meals into more plant-based type meals. So I think without further ado, we're just going to hand it right over to Faisal. So over to you, Faisal.
All right, thank you very much to Terry, and it's lovely to see everyone here on a very sunny, hot day, at least where I am in KL. Hope everyone's doing well and safe and sound. And Happy New Year. I think it's not too late to say that as well. It's still the beginning of the year, and we're already midway through January, so time flies so very fast. So let me just share my slides so that we can get started straight away. All right, so, okay, great. So yeah, let's get into this topic. And as Terry mentioned, so we're going to skip the sugar part today. So although the images here are all the sugary stuff, but I think that we are already accustomed to that, and we have already heard a lot of things about diabetes and what triggers it and causes it and maybe makes it worse and all that. So among the things that do make it worse is the sugars that we intake into our bodies. All right, but before I get into all that, let me just maybe get started with why we are concerned about all this and why me and my family, and I have to give a big shout out to my wife and partner, life partner Aina, who actually helped me a lot on this presentation, and actually to note all the presentations that I do. So she does a lot of the groundwork and research as well together with me. And but basically this is our big reason why we are very passionate about this. And because if you can see in the picture here in the background, that is my father-in-law, and he had a chronic case of diabetes. In case those who are not familiar, diabetes is when you have a blood glucose of above 6.5, and HbA1c is a more, I would say, a more permanent measurement where it takes the average historical reading of based on your blood workout of the past 3 months, all right, of your blood glucose levels. And so hemoglobin A1C, that's the marker. And so it's a more accurate reading. And so if you can see here in 2015, his reading was 9.6, way above the 6.5, all right. But then 2 years later in 2017, it became 12.7. And then in 2019, within the span of 4 years, it went all the way up to 15.9. I don't know if any one of you have anybody here that going through diabetes, or have any family members going through diabetes, but I think it is something for us to take concern about, because we knew that whatever he was facing throughout those 4 or 5 years was something concerning to us, and we were trying to get him to change a lot of his lifestyle habits, his eating habits, and so forth. But being the very focused and determined man he is, he wasn't concerned about it too much at the time. But unfortunately, in the early 2019, on March, that's when he actually suffered a major stroke. All right, and that is one of the main chronic effects of diabetes. Diabetes is one of a chronic disease as well. Chronic means long term. And the thing about diabetes is many people suffer from diabetes, not because of the diabetes itself, but because of other complications. And stroke is one of it. All right. So in March, 15.9. And only after the stroke is that when we were, me and my wife, especially Aina, was able to put our interventions into place, where we changed his dietary intake 360 degrees, and also supplemented with a lot of vitamins and minerals as well on top of that. And within 1 month, so in March, he was, I mean, since the doctors was already looking at it and really alarming, so he started insulin. He was taking about 4 jabs per day, and on a host of medicine and drugs. I'm sure uh, you're aware of that as well. And so he was on insulin. After a month, after going through the lifestyle habits change, and we introduced a whole food plant-based diet with minimal salt, sugar, and oils. And within 1 month, he was able to reduce his insulin intake to only 1 per day. All right. And within 3 months, he was able to reduce his medicines to just 1. I think he was taking about a cocktail of about 4 or 5 medicines, right? And so within 3 months, he reduced it to just 1 and off insulin altogether. All right. And within 5 months, so by August, his HbA1c dropped all the way back to the normal range at 6.0. And now today is about 3 years, and he's been hovering around the 5+ range, which is well below the diabetic or pre-diabetic levels, and at a normal range, healthy range, all through mindful eating, being more mindful of what we eat, and so now strictly on a plant-based diet, and also supplementation as well, among other things. All right, so this is our big why. So let me go through why this is important. All right, so for today, as Terry mentioned, so I'm known to be one of the more controversial ones, but I'll try not to be. We'll see how it goes. But basically, I'll be sharing with you all today also some of the things that me and my wife over the course of more than 10 years have been learning, reading, going through a lot of seminars, workshops, programs, diplomas, certificates, and so forth, like what Terry mentioned just now. So it is something that we also picked up and had to unlearn and relearn ourselves. All right. And fortunately, I think the second one is that through the years, we have seen and seen personal evidence as well that diabetes is actually reversible. So I'm not sure what the medical term for this is. Some say remission and all that. Maybe Dr. Azlinda can advise later on. But but basically we can reverse the conditions, and whenever we measure the results, it has been consistent and stable. All right. And thirdly, of course, we would like to see how malnutrition actually causes all these chronic diseases, and we'll cover a little bit more on that topic later on. Okay. So I just wanted to start with this because our journey as well, on a personal level, me and Aina, we were triggered by a very own, the late Dr. Aziz as well, who actually kind of provoked our thinking at the time and with all his teachings and sharings and all that. But he introduced these couple of books which kind of intrigued us from the very beginning. And so Reversing Heart Disease, where at that time, even this is over 10 years ago, we thought that heart disease is like that's the end of it all, right? So you can't, there's no way to recover from that. But funnily enough, he talked about this book and Dr. Dean Ornish, and so we tried to find out more about him. And then at the same time, I think Dr. Aziz was also mentioning about this other book called The China Study, where they did this study all across China for hundreds of years, across a few thousand people, and looking into how the diet plays a major role in terms of their long-term health. All right, so we'll go into that as well. All right, so but one thing led to another, and through our readings and through all over the years, course of the years, we discovered other wellness gurus, and many of those are from the medical line as well. And this one in particular is Dr. Neil Barnard, where, like Dean Ornish talking about reversing heart disease, Dr. Neil Barnard is known to be more of the guru about reversing diabetes. All right. And so this is his book. So you can, a lot of the content here, I will be referring to a lot of his literature and so forth. So you can find out more about him. And so he and his team actually founded this organization called the Physicians Committee, where there are a lot of, they are very involved with the American government, the Health Association, the FDA, the new My Plate, I think that's what they call it in the US, was a lot influenced by this group as well. All right, so and they do a lot of good things there. All right, so I would rather than I explain it to you guys, let me allow and invite my friend Dr. Neil Barnard to kind of like give his thoughts on how we can all reverse diabetes. Okay, so let's have a listen. Can you hear the audio? Sorry, let me just make sure that's on. Is that audible, Terry?
No, I don't hear anything.
Okay. Let me
Faisal.
just quickly, sorry, I forgot that part. Okay. Sorry, I missed that. Try that again. Okay.
Many people are concerned about the risk of diabetes, and many people have it already. If you have type 2 diabetes, though, it can be a two-way street. And to begin a diet change to reverse diabetes, step one is to avoid animal products. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to avoid sugar or avoid bread or maybe rice. Well, these carbohydrates do release glucose into the blood, and that's why people thought, okay, that sugar must be the problem. But it turns out that the real problem with diabetes is the buildup of fat inside the cells of the body. When fat builds up in your muscle cells or in your liver cells, the sugar can't get inside, and that's the problem. And so that's why step one is to avoid animal products, because when we do, there's no animal fat in the diet at all. That helps the cells to clean out. Step two, keep vegetable oils to a minimum. If you're the kind of person who is making dinner and you take your bottle of oil and you go glug, 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 oil all over everything, that fat gets into your cells too, and that's a problem. So step three is choose the healthiest foods. So white bread, okay, but rye bread or pumpernickel, much better. The whole grain breads are better. White potatoes are okay, but a sweet potato is much better. If you're having a breakfast cereal made for children, that's going to raise your blood sugar, especially if the box of cereal has a toy inside. You know what I'm talking about. Have a healthier kind of something like oatmeal porridge or bran cereal. That's better for you. Instead of sugar, have fruit. Apples and bananas and oranges and peaches. These foods taste sweet, but they're very gentle on your blood sugar. So, step one, get away from the animal products. Step 2, keep the oil very low. Step 3, choose the healthiest sources of carbohydrate. And over time, your diabetes might start to improve. Now, I have one last thing though. Let your doctor know that you're going to do this, because although these steps sound very simple, they can be very, very powerful. And if you're taking medicine for your diabetes, your blood sugar can start to fall too low when you're on a very healthy diet. So your doctor can reduce your medicine as the diet starts to bring your blood sugar down naturally, and that's going to be the best part of the solution. Good luck.
All right, so that's basically my talk.
Yeah, or maybe I should let you vacuum first. Nanti kau tak I jalan, nanti I will.
Am I okay? All right. So, yep, that basically wraps up my talk, Terry. So, but yeah, I mean, like that's basically the steps that Dr. Neil Barnard actually recommends, and anybody can actually do it. And I believe a lot of doctors out there would also probably be saying the same thing to their patients as well. I think the challenge is not many actually try to follow it, right? So I think that will be the main challenge. But if they were to do this, and we have seen it firsthand, that's why we are very confident and passionate about this, because we know that it can be done. All right, so our father-in-law did it, and this is what we did. So this is if for those who were maybe wondering or asking us how did they do it, basically we eliminated all animal products from his diet. No more beef, chicken, meats, lamb. He loves lamb, and the cheese and so forth, eggs and all that, all no more. All the oils, all fried stuff, even olive oil on salads, eliminated and all that, because any oils would still add up into the body. However, later on we'll touch a bit more where it is more of the trans and saturated fats, which is more available in the animal products. All right. And finally, of course, is to choose the healthiest kind of foods, eating clean as much as possible, no processed foods, reduce or minimize or even eliminate your salt, sugars as well, and so forth. If you can understand the ingredient, then you can eat it. If you don't understand the ingredient, I would say advise not to go consume it and so forth, right? So those are the three main sets. And if you notice here, there's no mention at all about sugars or anything, all right? So it's just about the fats. So let me explain further what that means, because why is that the case? For diabetes, what we have been known or been taught to understand about sugars and all that is just actually on the surface level. That's just the top where the symptom is. It's kind of like the iceberg, right? We only see the top of it, or like 10-20% of the iceberg, but we don't see the 80%, what is happening and what is going on and all that, right? So actually what happens is that when we have our unhealthy foods, the fatty fried foods, the highly processed foods, or the animal-based foods, and the meats and the seafood and all that, eventually it causes inflammation in our bodies, it causes stress to the organs and so forth. And with this fat, the excess fat that we have in our body, as Dr. Barnard explained a little bit just now, and I'll go through a bit more later, is it introduces this condition called insulin resistance. And when our body becomes insulin resistant, especially for type 2 diabetes, and this is where we get diabetic, right? And that's causing glucose to be floating around in the bloodstream, cannot go into the cells and cannot be converted to energy. And this is causing it to become hyperglycemic. That's the medical term for it, all right? So what we see is the symptom. What we're measuring, blood glucose and all that, is a symptom, but what is the underlying cause? It is the fats in the food that we eat, and the excess fat that we have is blocking our cells. And this is how it works, all right? So imagine your cell, all right? So your cell has a cell wall, it has a cell lining. It's kind of like its own house, all right? And like any house, there's a door, and to access the door, you need a key, all right? So in this case, the key to the house or your cell is insulin, okay? That's what insulin does. Insulin is like a key that unlocks the door, and the door is not only giving access to things to go out in and out, and one of the things that gives access to is the glucose. So glucose goes in and out from the blood into the cells, is only made possible by insulin when it actually unlocks the door. So if you can see here, so you see the key, insulin is unlocking the door. When it unlocks the door, then only glucose can go in. So this is a cell, and imagine the pink dots is the glucose, and then penetrating into the cell, and the cell uses the glucose to convert into energy and functions the cell and so forth, right? All right. So, however, when there's a lot of fat in your body, or when you consume a lot of fats, this fat actually deposits into the cell itself. And when it's inside the cell, it's kind of like clogging up the keyholes. All right. So how Dr. Barnett would say, it's kind of like the analogy is like having somebody putting chewing gum into your key door, the hole of the keyhole, right? What will happen? You even if you have the correct key, you can't open the door. So until you actually clean it out, flush out the chewing gum, and then only you can open the door. So although insulin is here, insulin is present, but it can't open the door because the fat is blocking the keyhole. And when that happens, the glucose cannot go in because the door is still locked. All right. Okay, so that's what's happening in our body when we are diabetic, because there's too much fat in the cells causing the blockage. All right, when there's blockage, what happens to the glucose? They're just floating around in the bloodstream, and this is the excess glucose that's in the blood, and which causes insulin to be produced more, and then causing more stress to the pancreas. And when there's too much glucose in the blood also becomes more viscous. It becomes not so fluid. It can't travel as fast, right? Heavy. It's like a heavy truck going through the roads, right? So if you can see here, a heavy overloaded truck, it's kind of like if it goes through narrow roads, it's kind of slow and sluggish and constricting a lot of things. So that's what's happening in the body as well when we have high blood glucose. All right. So in summary, just to summarize what we just saw just now, was when we have fats in our bodies and inside the cells, it's something medically it's called intramyocellular lipids, and it accumulates in the cells, it clogs up this keyhole. And when this happens, the insulin cannot function, it cannot open the door. And when that happens, it cannot allow the glucose to enter the cell. And this is the condition what we call insulin resistance. And what this causes is the glucose remains in the bloodstream, and this excess glucose will sooner or later cause more stress to the pancreas because it thinks there's more glucose it needs more keys to unlock the doors, right? But unfortunately, that's not the case. And this causes other complications. So like blurry vision, you can have lack of energy because of the poor blood circulation and so forth. And long term, when this is not addressed for long periods of time, like how in the case of my father-in-law over 4 or 5 years, and then this is what things can happen. You can get into blindness, you can cause kidney disease, kidney damage, nerve damage, you can get gangrene and then get amputated, heart attack, stroke, depression, and even dementia. All right, so this is the chronic effects, and this is what we don't want to happen. And if we don't treat or address the diabetes or control it, this is what will happen eventually. All right, so let me just play this other quick. So what else what should and how should we approach this? So let's hear a little bit more from Dr. Barnett here.
In diabetes, there's too much sugar in the blood. And up until now, people with diabetes have said, well, too much sugar in my blood, don't eat sugar. Well, we reasoned that in countries like China, Japan, Thailand, Cambodia, where it's a very high carbohydrate diet but a very low fat diet, given that they have the lowest diabetes rates in the world, we thought it's not carbohydrate. The problem has to do with fat. Those fats get into the cells, that causes that insulin resistance, so the diet should be getting the fat out of the cells so insulin can work again. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset. The problem is that the insulin, which is this hormone that acts like a key to let the sugar out of the blood into the muscle cells, where it can power your movements, that insulin key isn't working very well. Starting in 2003, the US government funded my team to test a totally vegan diet. I'm talking about no animal products at all, but it wasn't a low-carb diet at all. People could eat rice and pasta all they wanted, and it worked dramatically well, better than a more conventional diabetes diet. People lost weight, their blood sugars came down, their cholesterols fell, and oddly enough, they found it easier to follow this kind of diet because we didn't make them count calories. They could eat as much as they wanted. Type 1 diabetes used to be called childhood onset. The cells that make insulin are dead. And so if a person already has type 1 diabetes, if you put them on a healthy vegan diet, that will reduce the likelihood of complications. There are researchers who now believe that one of the big triggers for type 1 diabetes is dairy products. It turns out that proteins in cow's milk, the body recognizes them as foreign proteins. The body makes antibodies to destroy them. Those same antibodies then destroy the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. And there's a major study right now that's nailing down whether, if kids are breastfed and they are not given a cow's milk protein at all during infancy, that we might be able to reduce the risk of type 1 diabetes. The evidence so far says that's exactly right.
All right. So what Dr. Banat here was saying was basically that the dietary changes actually affect how diabetes came about. And if we notice, so in the China study, in that book that I was mentioning earlier, they did the study and they noticed that the Chinese population, when they were getting all these chronic diseases, was only when all these fast food chains came into the country and all these fried foods came. If not before this, most of the population only eat a lot of soupy, steamed stuff and all that, right? So, but when American culture and American influence came in, then they changed that diet as well, and that's when they saw the chronic diseases also increased and the diabetes as well. So the study that he was also talking about just now, where the US government was asking him to check on the diet that would be best for diabetic patients, because the American Diabetes Association, their recommendation was just to do limited calories. I mean, to limit the calories, reduce the calories, reduce their carbohydrates, and limit bad fats. But it still introduced or suggested that you can eat animal proteins and so forth. All right. Whereas, so what he compared to was the study was to compare to a totally vegan, plant-based only diet, no animal products, minimize all oils, and low glycemic index, which is basically higher fiber and lower processing. All right. So what they found is the red parts is the American Diabetes Association diet, and the blue parts is the totally vegan plant-based diet. And they noticed although the ADA diet did help a little bit, but the vegan diet clearly shows a more dramatic improvement. And I think by the time of the end of the study, a lot more people actually can actually reverse their diabetes altogether. All right. So this is another study, and basically this is a study among a group called the Adventists, and this is based in California in the US. And in 2009, this is a study across 89,000 over people. And they also did they studied the different dietary patterns that they were going through, because some people may think, oh, I can just reduce my beef, oh, so now I don't take any, or they just don't take any more beef and maybe go into seafood only and so forth. Would it make a difference? Yes, it does make a difference. However, if you want the best result, and if you can see here, if you go fully vegan, meaning no more animal proteins, no more milk, no more eggs, and no more cheese and all that, you can reduce your risk of diabetes by almost 80%. All right. Vegetarians, on the other hand, these are the ones who almost fully plant-based, but they still consume milk, dairy, cheese, eggs, and so forth. So this is 61%. Pesco-vegetarian means they still eat fish and seafood, and so they can reduce by half, but it's still not as good as the 80% vegetarians. So if they're still occasionally eating meats, chicken, beef, and so forth, they can have a slight reduction, but it's not as much as what you can see here as the vegan plant-based group. All right, so what they have introduced from PCRM and from Dr. Barnard's group is basically this concept of the power plate, where it's kind of like the suku-suku separuh juga kan, it's the same, pretty much similar, where you have half your plate as vegetables, but rather than all just salads and so forth, a part of that vegetable group is from legumes, which is basically beans, dals, lentils, soybeans, tempeh, and tofu, and so forth, right? And so everything else is pretty much similar, and that's where the protein comes from. Okay. Touching a little bit about the type 1 diabetes, about basically where our body is not able to produce enough insulin, either because the pancreas is not functioning properly, or the cells that is producing that insulin hormone is not functioning anymore, and so forth. And there are still studies are still non-conclusive by the academic terms. However, there has been a lot of studies showing that there is some relationship between dairy milk consumption and that reduced insulin sensitivity, and so therefore can maybe causing further damage or concern to the type 1 diabetic patients. All right. All right, so if you want more reference on or examples of how people have done it and how successful this program or this method actually does, or how dietary changes can work, this is a couple of authors. They are both type 1 diabetes patients as well. And one in Cyrus on the right hand side actually did a PhD in insulin resistance. He did biomed. And so they co-authored this book called Mastering Diabetes, where dietary changes and so forth can really make an impact. And it's all boils down to the fat intake into our bodies. All right. And locally, there is also a lot of groups nowadays promoting this as well, where by changing into a predominantly plant-based dietary lifestyle, and then you can actually see a dramatic results in lowering your blood glucose and other markers as well, like cholesterol and high blood pressure and so forth, right? So I think for now I have achieved number 1 and 2, where there are a lot of things that probably new concepts to some people, and but I just wanted to show the fact that diabetes is actually reversible and that we can control it, and help our friends and family to go who are going through that. All right, so let's go through the last bit of malnutrition, and I'll just go through it very quickly. I think this one everyone knows. Diabetes is ever increasing in Malaysia, and Malaysia is leading that pack in ASEAN. In Asia, we're also the highest rate of obesity and overweight in the region. In Malaysia, we're about now 1 out of 5 Malaysians are diabetic, and according to the health minister at that time, he was also saying, and by 2025 there'll probably be 1 out of 3 Malaysians actually being diabetic. And so if you are sitting between a friend on the left and right, you look, it's either you or your friend to your right or to your left has diabetes. All right, so it's not a fun thing. All right, and the worrying thing is a lot of people are still going undiagnosed. They don't even know they're diabetic, or even pre-diabetic. So what pre-diabetes mean is if they have a reading of more than 5.5. I think in Malaysia we up to 6.5. I think the figures often change. So between 5.5 to about 6.5 or so is already pre-diabetic, and so it can also cause some of the symptoms that we're talking about: the blurry vision, the lethargy, and so forth. All right. Okay, and and all these in nutrition sense, because all these chronic diseases introduces other complications, and chronic diseases actually come from a point where we are not getting enough nutrition as well. So in this sense, where like the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, would also recommend that if we cannot truly change our dietary habits to be fully, like in this instance, fully vegan and fully clean plant-based eating 100% of the time, then it is probably prudent to also take vitamin supplements as well. All right, so when we see this malnutrition, there's two parts to malnutrition. If we understand it, there's the I think everyone understands undernutrients, where we're not getting enough nutrition, and maybe not enough eating or not enough eating certain foods and so forth, and we get deficiency. But I think nowadays the modern lifestyle ways of the world, even in Malaysia, is that we have overnutrition, where we're overeating or over consuming fatty foods, processed foods and so forth, and we get a nutrient imbalance and causing all these chronic diseases. And so for diabetes, a lot of research has shown a lot of the things that they have studied around diabetes patients, they also are lacking in some of these vitamins and minerals. All right, so so like vitamin B's, B12 and B3, vitamin D, vitamin C, carnitine, coenzyme Q10 as well, because of the some of these also because of the side effects of the medication that they consume through diabetes, can also cause some damage as well. And yep. And but some also comes from actually helping certain things in the body that it can support and further improve the function of the body and certain organs in the body, like the endocrine system, the pancreas or the liver, and the blood system, circulation and so forth, to kind of like improve our diabetic conditions that is being caused over time in our bodies, right? So for me and my family, although we are already plant-based, but we still believe that supplements are still crucial to be consumed, because we're not 100% perfect all the time either. All right, and we know that the food quality nowadays, unless you're getting 100% organic foods all the time, getting it from the right sources and eating it at the right amounts and all that, but we still believe that we still need to nourish our bodies a lot more vigilantly. And I think the most cost-effective and most convenient way to do so is by supplementing. And for me and my family, we have chosen the Nutralite brand of supplements in this case to do that, because they are they primarily use plant-based sources for their vitamins and minerals and supplementation. So I would just like to highlight a couple of these of the supplements that we take on a frequent basis, daily basis, in fact. So for the first one, so for those who are trying to convert or transition to a more plant-based diet and concern maybe of their protein levels in their body and so forth, then maybe this is a great solution for you. The all plant or soy protein drink is 100% plant-based. It's a combination of soy, wheat, and pea, and it's a complete protein of all the essential amino acids that our body needs. And on top of that, is easily digestible by our body, so it's easily absorbed by the body for the protein intake. All right, and double X is something is a multivitamin, multimineral, and high in antioxidants with phytonutrients, and covers all the spectrum of the vitamins and minerals deficiencies that I was showing earlier about from diabetes patients, right? So it has the chromium, it has the calcium, zinc, magnesium, and so forth, and all important for people who are going through diabetes or going through the condition, because it's not a condition that you suddenly have it, but it's been prolonging over a period of time and causing other things. So what this multivitamin, multimineral can do, it can help to close that nutritional gap that almost everyone would have, and knowingly or unknowingly, right? Okay, so to summarize everything, is to the best thing that we can do and try to do is to eliminate all animal proteins from our diet, eliminate all fatty foods, the fried and stuff, and even all the over dressing of oils on our salads and so forth. All right, and eliminate still still control the sugars, definitely try to avoid any extra sugars and so forth, and reduce any or all processed foods, have higher fiber foods, have higher lower GI foods, complex carbohydrates, and also to supplement with a high quality multivitamin, and have plenty of water and rest daily so that you can improve your overall lifestyle and health long term. All right, with that, I end my presentation. I hope that was helpful and beneficial to some of you. And I can maybe go through some questions if we have any. Thank you. Back to you,
Thank you.
Terry.
Thank you, Faisal. That was very, very enlightening, very stimulating as always. There were a couple of questions and it was relating to food, Faisal.
Sure.
So perhaps we could take those questions first. I think there was one about fish and the other one was about dairy and yeah, about dairy, I think.
Okay.
So perhaps you want to address the dairy and eggs. Yeah, so perhaps you want to address that.
Okay, so I should go through it. Okay, so let me just scroll up a little bit. Okay, so the first one, what about fish? From Puan Salina. Yes, so fish also falls into the animal category and it's animal protein. And yes, as I showed one of the charts, if you noticed just now, the non-vegetarian, semi-pesco, vegetarian, and vegan. So to those who are eliminating all land animals, all the beef, chicken, and poultry and stuff. And so they just focus on eating seafood. That does help to a certain degree, but it still cannot match the powers of going fully plant-based. All right. So, and I think that is a transition that we made as well over the years. First, like my family started to go into more seafood, and then eventually after more research and studying and learning and all that, we eventually went all the way to plant-based 100% as well. So yes, to answer that, if you do want to see more like a dietary approach of treatment and a plant-based treatment, then if they are treating a condition of diabetes, then definitely going all out plant-based would be the way to go. All right. But of course, if we understand Malaysians are food lovers and we're living in a food heaven. So if that is totally impossible or unacceptable by them, then I guess the only other way would be to come in between and to also introduce some supplementation to help to address those nutritional gaps as well. All right, so the following question about milk, half-boiled egg. Yep. So Norwani, it's not that I'm saying that you cannot consume, but if you are facing diabetes or you are trying to treat somebody or to manage or control, help somebody going through diabetes, then our at least our personal recommendation would be to eliminate that from the diet altogether. Yes, it's not going to be beneficial to the person going through the diabetes as well. And I would say at least give it a try. Give it a try 2 to 3 months. And like how Dr. Barnett was saying as well, if that person is going to do a dramatic change in their diet, because the doctors are advising this anyway, but the patients are not doing it. So if you are going to do it, please do get in touch with your doctor and tell them that you're doing this, because they need to monitor how much medicine they need to administer, because the blood lowering sugar drugs does take an effect. And if you don't want to make it too low, because then you will go into hypoglycemic, and that's not a condition you want to go into either. And so, but if you do these dietary changes, inshallah, in the next, you can see some results. Even in the first two weeks, you can see already some blood lowering effects. And then to go into remission, probably need to be continuous at least 2 to 3 months to see some effects long term. All right. And I would advise, if you can go on it long term. And as Dr. Madan was saying that this plant-based diet is easy to do because there's no calorie restrictions and all that. As long as you eat clean, you can eat as much as you want, because you feel full because of all the fibers and all that, but still the calorie count is very, very low. All right.
I just wanted to say, to add to what Faisal was saying, I know I got a couple of messages on my phone saying that, oh yeah, Is that the only way you can reduce diabetes? So I just want to mention to you that Faisal is coming from a place, from his experience with his father-in-law and with their family. And they're also coming from a place where they're plant-based advocates. And what we try to do is to give different views and interesting, challenge you in your thinking. So if you do have that condition, we want you to listen to what Faisal says seriously and do your own research. Ultimately, it's your choice and your research. There have been people who have been able to
Sure.
bring down their diabetes without necessarily cutting meat. But I'm very, very sure at least 2/3 of the advice that Faisal gives is going to be applicable, 2/3, if not 80%, at least in terms of the supplementation and moving towards a lot more fruit and vegetables. I think that will not be able to, that won't change, yeah? But whether it's the egg or the fish or the chicken, I think that may be something you'll have to kind of make decision for you and your family, depending on what works for you as a family. We're not asking you to go cold turkey. So just wanted to make that point, yeah?
So I think the best thing that you can do is to actually read up the materials yourself. You need to do your own research. You need to definitely convince yourself as well that this is something that can be done and workable for you. And I think the good thing about this dietary intervention is there's no side effects as far to my knowledge, except for the good effects that it causes. But of course, when you need to discuss it with your doctors as well, because so that they can monitor the drugs and medicine that they need to administer or the insulin levels that they need to give. All right.
So
And
Aisha's, did you see Aisha's question there
yes,
on
I'm
whether
looking
this
at it
diet?
now.
Yes, okay, if you
So
could address
for
that.
growing children and someone who's active, yep, I think for a plant-based diet, I mean, me and my family, we've been plant-based for the past 3 to 5 years now, and I think we have no problems. And my kids are all growing kids as well. One is the eldest is 10 now, the second one is 6, and the third one is 1 year old, and they're now fully 100% plant-based. My girl has never touched or tasted chicken all her life. She's never eaten any eggs or dairy milk whatsoever. And so in our, at least in our personal experience, there's no issues with growing children. But like any concerned parent, that's why we still also give supplements to them. So to just in case, right? So we just still provide them with some multivitamins, some protein supplements as well, to ensure that they are not lacking in any way. And in terms of how they grow, I think they grow like any other kid. And if we saw anything less than that, then of course we would be going through I would say referring to other specialists or doctors to see what's the issues and so forth. So far there's no issues with that. And locally there have been a growing population of plant-based doctors as well, who do advocate plant-based dietary lifestyle as well, and they can also advise more into this if you are concerned about that area.
There's a good question here from Nazli. Your father, your father-in-law would have been used to Malay ways of cooking, like
Sure.
many of us here in Malaysia. So how do you eliminate the oil? Because well, it's not just Malay cooking. I think it's Malaysian cooking. It's just how do you? And it's tasty, right? Oily food.
Yes. So without a doubt, I mean, like I said earlier, Malaysia is food heaven, right? So I think, and we got a mix of cultures from all over the world and in our plates, and available 24/7. In fact, so I think the challenge was to start that off, but I think we were fortunate that because of the stroke, he basically did not have a choice. So it may be different for you. If you have a diabetic patient who still can go to the kitchen themselves, then it's a problem. But in our case, he probably just he pretty much just had to eat whatever was served to him. So it's a bit different in our case lah. But however, that being said, whatever we did serve, it's not like we just serve salads or just fruits all the time. That is primarily most of the things that we did give. Let me just share you some of the pictures of the foods that we did provide with him. So do you see here? These are all mostly Malaysian cuisines, right? But you'll be surprised to know that a lot of or all of this is all plant-based. There's no chicken, there's no beef, there's no eggs, and so the standards of foods in the plant-based or the vegan community has increased dramatically over the years. And now and this particular provider from Plant-Based Kitchen, they have found the perfect formula together with the 5-star hotel chef who has cracked the code in making Malaysian food all plant-based, low SOS, but still tastes good. So it is a challenge, and you can actually do it if you learn how to do it. There are techniques, and it is always been improving. And nowadays, there's a lot of recipes that you can follow if you want to tag along as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we won't have time for too many other any other question, but just a reminder from Dr. Aslinda that we can always replace animal protein with plant-based protein.
Yes.
And we have a lot of it in nature. And if it's difficult, you know, soy protein, our neutralized soy protein is actually very available and, you know, a really good resource as well. Thank you so much again, Faisal, for your time. I know we've taken more time than you were supposed to of your time, but we really appreciate you giving us an alternative view and challenging us to kind of think larger than, you know, what the conventional wisdom is in relation to diabetes and in relation to food. And that's the whole point of our meeting week after week. It's not just that we learn the same thing, but that we're challenged to think outside the box about, you know, what goes into our bodies and what nutrition is best for our families. And we hope for you, as you learn and as you research, you will make the right choices for you as well. A really good start, I think, is to start taking your supplementation. If you're not taking enough fruit and vegetable, go and get that double X that Faisal is talking about. At least that will meet your minimum requirement. And then, and that also has chromium, which helps diabetes. And then you can make the other, you know, food choices as you go along. So thank you again, Faisal. I always appreciate what you say. And, you know, you always challenge me and provoke my thinking about what we eat. Now, you know, my cheeses are getting less and less in my fridge. So thank you for that.
There are plant-based cheese too nowadays.
Okay, I shall try that. So good afternoon, everybody, and we hope you all are safe. We'll see you next week. Next week, we're talking about building, we're talking about fitness because this is the beginning of the year. Many of us are looking at our fitness goals. So we have Sharifa Amira, none other than our very excitable and enthusiastic Sharifa Amira teaching us and giving us a kind of a guideline on how we can set our goal towards a fitness, how we can set a fitness goal and what are the steps we can take towards it. Okay, thank you very much and good to see you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you, Faisal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Terry.
Great sharing.
Bye.
Thank you,
See you.
Terry.
Bye.
Faisal. Thank